June 2022, and, humble brag, for the second time in 3 months, I find myself on board Concorde. Shame none of them have flown for nearly 20 years. The earliest references to Woking suggest a religious foundation of the area around the 8th century, with a minster existing in Woking by 775. Woking Palace was first recorded in 1272, but by the middle of the 17th century this had fallen into ruins. However, it was around this time that Woking was firmly put on the map with the coming of the Wey Navigation Canal, linking Guildford to the Thames, followed later by the Basingstoke Canal, which now runs through the centre of town, and past the Lightbox Museum and Gallery, which has a small museum on the history of the town. Development of Woking really took off with the arrival of the railways, and from the sell-off of unused land by the London necropolis after the cemetery at nearby Brookwood was completed. Woking's most famous resident was H.G. Wells, who wrote The War of the Worlds whilst living in Woking in 1898, statues to the author and reminders of his work being dotted through the town centre. Woking is a convenient jumping off point to explore the local area, with Brooklands just 5 miles northeast of the town. Brooklands was the world's first purpose-built banked motor racing circuit when it opened in 1907, and it's credited with being the birthplace of motor racing in the UK. In its heyday, its banked circuit held races for cars, motorbikes and cycles, and the large level grass centre for the track proved to be a convenient place to become one of Britain's first aerodromes as well, with early planes adding to the heady mixture of adrenaline-based adventures on the site. The last race was held in 1939 with the outbreak of the Second World War. With the site being turned over to aircraft production for the war effort, naturally the site became a target, with the track being damaged by bombs and a section removed to make way for the new access road. Today, the original paddock from the heyday and a small amount of the bank track survive as part of the Brooklands Museum. The museum is dedicated to the history of motorsport, with a particular focus on those early days when Brooklands was a mecca for speed enthusiasts. Alongside Grand Prix race cars and motorbikes, there's also a healthy collection of exhibits on regular cycles, which also used to be raced around the tracks. Located on site is the London Bus Museum, which traces the history of buses in London from the earliest horse-drawn omnibuses through the classic London double-deck open-platform red bus and historic regional buses to the modern fully electric buses. You can even go on a ride around the local roads on a historic double-decker. For the first part of its life, Brooklands was known for ground-based speed, But even from the early days, aviation had an interest in the site. By 1939, Brooklands was home to both Vickers and Hawker, who helped build bombers and fighters here. After the war, Vickers pivoted towards passenger jets. Through various mergers, the site eventually became home to the British Aircraft Corporation, who produced 111s and VC-10s on the site, and eventually major components for Concorde. So it's only natural that alongside the cars, bikes and buses, Brooklands also housed a collection of vintage aircraft from the different types that were manufactured here. 111s, VC-10s, Vanguards, Vikings and Viscounts. But taking pride of place, back home where she was born, is Golf Bravo Bravo Delta Golf, the first British production Concorde, and the Concorde that was used to certify the type. It's this plane that first took passengers beyond the speed of sound. She was never used in commercial service, but instead used to test routes and to try and attract sales from airlines. Retired in 1981, she finally made it back to Brooklands in 2003 and can now be looked around as part of a guided tour. Inside are examples of what might have been, with the proposed liveries for some of the airlines who expressed an interest. In the forward part of the cabin are examples of the seating and service that would have been on board from the final flights in the early 2000s, through the 1980s and 1990s, and back to the unmistakable brown of the 1970s. At the end of the tour, there's the opportunity to look into the cockpit of this most unique of planes. Three and a half miles east of Brooklands is the Claremont Landscape Garden. The garden is one of the earliest surviving examples of an English landscape garden, still it's an original 18th century layout. Originally created for the neighbouring Claremont House, now a separate private school, the gardens were first laid out in 1709 by Sir John Vanbrugh after he bought the land to develop. In 1714 he sold the estate to the Duke of Norfolk, who built up the gardens. Around 1720, designer Charles Bridgman was brought in to craft a formal garden for the Duke, his biggest addition being the 3-acre turf amphitheatre carved into the hillside. In the 1730s, William Kent was brought in to refresh the gardens, which included turning the basin at the base of the amphitheatre into a lake. In 1769, Clive of India bought the estate and commissioned Lancelot Capability Brown to carry out further works. In 1816, Claremont passed into royal hands and became home to Princess Charlotte, the only child of George, Prince of Wales, later George IV, and her husband, Prince Leopold. The gardens became her pleasure ground for the short time that she was here until her death in 1817. Leopold retained ownership of the estate until he died in 1865, but left the house when he became the first king of the Belgians in 1831. Queen Victoria eventually purchased the estate for her fourth and youngest son, unhelpfully also called Leopold, in 1882. Leopold's son Charles inherited the title and position of Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha in 1900 and moved to Germany to take up the position, becoming a German citizen. When his mother died in 1922, the house and gardens should have passed to him. By then, the British government weren't in the happiest of moods with the now defeated Germany and disallowed the inheritance, confiscating the estate. It was sold by a public trustee to Sir William Corey, director of the Cunard Line. By 1930, the house stood empty and was threatened with demolition, but in the end, the estate was purchased by the governors of the school, originally based in Norwood, to become their new premises. Finally, in 1949, the National Trust acquired the 50 acres that make up the landscape garden to take into their care, with major renovation works in the late 1970s, restoring the grounds to how they look today. 5 miles southwest of the Landscape Gardens is the much larger garden of the Royal Horticultural Society in Wisley. Established as the Oakwood Experimental Gardens in 1878 by RHS member George Fergus Wilson, the gardens were set up as an attempt to make difficult plants grow successfully. Wilson died in 1902 and his gardens were purchased by Sir Thomas Hanbury, who gave the whole estate to the RHS the following year. The gardens are now home to formal and informal decorative gardens, several glasshouses and an extensive arboretum, as well as the laboratory where research and training is conducted. Woking is on the southwestern main line from London to Southampton and Bournemouth. There are very frequent trains to London Waterloo, taking around 30 minutes for fast and 50 minutes for stopping services. There are hourly trains to Southampton Airport, taking around 40 minutes to make the journey. From outside Woking Station, there's an hourly Rail Air bus to Heathrow, taking just 30 minutes to Terminal 5 and another 10 minutes on to the Central Bus Station for Terminals 2 and 3.